And we continue at 1:05 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, it doesn't get much more satisfying than this. Here is the actual sound of a bunch of mom-and-pop landlords booing Hugo Soto Martinez at yesterday's LA City Council meeting where he failed to pass an eviction moratorium.
I know the discussion is happening, but I just want to sort of center the decision that we're making today because I think most people could agree it's the right thing to do in this moment. Thank you.
That's a lot of boos.
Sounds like he has some critics.
Someone better run against him next year, and Ulysses.
He beat an incumbent, didn't he?
He did. It was a strange year.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. And correct me if I mispronounce your name. I'm going to try my best. Tuan Ngo. Is that correct?
Great. That is correct. Thank you for having me.
All right. Founder of Asians Unite, co-organizer, grassroots effort in the recall of Oakland's Mayor Sheng Tao and Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price. Tuan, thanks so much for stopping by.
Oh, thank you so much for raising attention to this issue of new leadership that we need in the city of Oakland and the county of Alameda to fix the dysfunction that we have here that's unfortunately spreading throughout California.
So let's start out with what happened outside the courthouse, because you ended up going viral over a picture that was put on the front page of the local newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle, and ended up all over social media. It was when Sheng Tao had to appear in court with her attorney. She, of course, has been charged with various forms of public corruption while she was mayor of Oakland, and even before that, when she was a candidate to become mayor of Oakland. And you stood in the same frame as Sheng and her attorney, holding up a very critical sign about the former mayor.
Yes, it was just a moment that just appeared. I hadn't expected to run into her, but we were there in court, and the prosecutor was reading all these charges of multiple counts of bribery, conspiracy, wire fraud, mail fraud. And of course, like every time the residents who pay attention, see her on TV, she is just not being dishonest. So when we were there, we were part of the recall effort. I had a sign that says, incompetent and dishonest, which everybody who follows Oakland, City Hall knows that to be a fact. And she was out there with the press. And again, I was pretty sure that she's going to do a political spin. So we just needed to stand up and call her out on it. It was clearly something that resonated with the struggling residents of Oakland. And so it went viral on Instagram. There was probably 2 million views on Facebook, on Nextdoor. So it really speaks to the level of dysfunction Oakland is in and how the mayor is part of the establishment political system that has failed the residents. And we want to speak up and hold these corrupt officials accountable.
Now, when you were standing next to her, you were literally standing next to her. If she wanted to lean over and say something, you'd be able to hear it quite clearly. Did she say anything to you the whole time you were there?
I don't think she was aware. She was so focused. Number one, she didn't say anything. She was with her lawyer, and her lawyer was speaking for her, and she wasn't going to take any questions. I kind of walked up to her, and I was maybe half a step behind her. She was so focused in front of her with 20 or so cameras and news stations. It was live broadcasted, her response to being charged with all these heinous crimes. And she was standing there just smiling. And so I came up to her just to call her out, and she wasn't aware at all that she was getting photobombed.
Now, in the paper with the picture of her standing there with a great big smile on her face outside the courthouse, standing next to her attorney, and you holding up a sign that referred to her as incompetent. That had to be quite a surprise for her when she was sipping her morning coffee.
Oh, I'm sure it was mortifying, but it spoke the truth, because I have followed her even before she was elected mayor, where she put her own political ambition ahead of the safety and concerns of the residents. And I was so disappointed, because as an Asian myself, I wanted an Asian leader to succeed. She was a woman. I think it's harder to succeed as a woman. She was an immigrant. I'm an immigrant. I think there are challenges that you have to overcome. And so, all things being equal, the immigrant Asian community wanted to root for her, but we don't stand behind this level of corruption. In the end, she was more of a politician than somebody that represents us. In fact, she betrays our moral values. And if anybody is going to call her out, it needs to be somebody from our community that hold our own accountable. And it needs to be an Asian. I think if it's another white guy around where we are, they'll just say that person is being racist. No, it has to do with your competency in the job that you're supposed to do on behalf of the people, and it has to do with integrity. And she betrays the Asian, moral value. She doesn't represent us. She is not the voice for our community, and that needs to be clear out in the public. So that was also a statement of where we as the Asian community stand with corrupt officials who don't represent us.
If you read the charges against her, it's all pretty ugly, and the government thinks they have her dead to rights on public corruption. Do you think she is going to say that she did nothing wrong, or do you think she's going to turn on her boyfriend?
I think it's going to be a legal strategy, and I think she's going to look for a way out. I think there was discussion that she might have secretly gotten married with her longtime romantic partner, Andre Jones, so that they don't have to testify against each other and have some kind of immunity as husband and wife. There is discussion that, when the FBI and the IRS and the U.S. Postal Office, they raided her home. And when they raided her home, they took out boxes of evidence. That's hard drives, computer hard drives, that's telephone, that they copied everything. And I think they have hard evidence. They just don't charge. They have witness, they have corroborating evidence, and we expect the FBI investigation to broaden and more people is going to be indicted. I think there's always a bigger fish. I think the political system is pretty corrupt. So there's going to be people higher up on the ladder that the FBI might want to get to, bigger fish. So they might cut a deal with her if she testify and provide evidence and corroborate on, corruption that is pretty, I think, pervasive in Alameda County. I mean, in Oakland, we pay probably the second highest tax across California, and yet we don't have basic city services like public safety. So where did all this money go? And you look under the hood, and it's sort of like millions of dollars with like backroom deals and corruption and bribery and dirty politics, and nobody's there to represent the needs of the community. So it's time that Oakland residents rally together. That's why we're resonating with the grassroots movement for change. And, we're at the point where the pendulum needs to swing the other way for common sense and not just for speaking points from politicians that don't perform, that actually betray us with their backroom deals.
You look at the local news in Oakland, and it's almost always a crime story. It's almost always totally bonkers, and it never seems to get better. And you mentioned that her inability to provide basic services was something that was apparent the whole time she was mayor. You've seen the chaos going on with the lack of a police chief for the better part of a year. You've seen the ranks of the Oakland Police Department get smaller even when crime was going up. the 911 system is not compliant with what the state requires. It's not even close to being compliant. And you listen to her talk about crime, and she basically just says the same thing every time. Crime is going down. I'm doing a great job. And if you are critical of crime in Oakland, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. And she seemed to legitimately think that she was doing a great job and she would congratulate herself all of the time. But you look at the misery that people who are homeowners there, or a lot of retirees, particularly in the Asian community, where you had people that were breaking into retirement homes and assisted living facilities and beating them and robbing them right there without fear of going to jail because they knew that wasn't going to happen. You look at what the shopkeepers are going through when you have stolen cars being driven through the wall. So the ATMs are being stolen, or the cigarettes are being stolen, or the cash, whatever the case may be. And she just didn't seem to care. None of that seemed to bother her at all. She just figured that if she said that she was doing a good job and had everything under control, that was good enough.
That is simply a false narrative. It's a politically convenient narrative. And the people that put millions of dollars to install her into office installed her into office because she's willing to say these lies that the residents of Oakland can see is completely untrue. Our crime has gone up. They might cherry pick specific types of crime, whether it's homicide or whatever, for a particular, selected month or something. They might just distort things. But as far as the actual experience of residents, we have a council member who was elected a few months ago to the council. He's new. He said he was robbed 23 different times, and he didn't report the crime simply because the police here are overwhelmed. They have Sheng Tao, along with her council majority team, have voted to defund the police, to remove police academies that were training residents to respond to 911 calls. We have over 3,000 911 calls per day, and yet we, at any given moment, only have 30 to 35 officers on patrol to respond to those 911 calls. So the criminals know that police isn't there. They can do whatever they want to prey and victimize residents without any consequence. And not just the criminals in Oakland, but now the criminals in the neighboring adjacent cities know that they can come to Oakland and victimize everybody, seniors, assault, car theft, robberies, whatever they want to do, and they can get away with it. There is no deterrence, especially with Pamela Price. That's why we also have to recall Pamela Price, because she was enabling theft and not holding anybody accountable. So it's utter dysfunction. They talk about the community being better, but when you look around, there is nothing that works. We simply want something that's practical, that works. And at the end of the day, Sheng Tao lies to the people. None of her policies work. And we're really upset. And we demand a change in leadership. That's why overwhelming numbers of voters voted to recall Sheng Tao, about 60% or more. And the same thing with District Attorney Pamela Price. That's why they are gone. That's why we're looking for new leadership. But unfortunately, the political establishment is still there behind the scenes. They all have money interests. Hundreds of millions of taxpayer money is being bled to them. And then at every election cycle, they dump back maybe $2 million. And that's enough to basically run a false narrative and to get the votes that they need to elect someone. And the rest of us are normally just very busy residents who are focused on our families and our jobs. So we haven't really been as engaged as we need to be. But now that this dysfunction is totally out of control, more of us are just asking what's going on and just stepping up and calling out the corruption and holding our electeds accountable so we can, work together as a grassroots movement and fix our city, fix our county, and have policies that actually work for the betterment of everybody in our community.
When you talk to elderly people in your social network who live in Oakland, how terrified are they to leave their homes right now?
Chinatown used to be a vibrant community. It's open late, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. People are out and about. Now people close their shop at 4 o'clock. Thousands of businesses have gone under. The seniors don't feel comfortable walking. We have Lake Merritt, beautiful lake, and people used to jog around the lake. Now people, after the shootings that happen, people getting killed broad daylight, people don't feel comfortable walking around the lake. And we have basically huge sections of our town that is like a ghost town. And it's hard to attract new business. We need businesses, need to be supported, small businesses especially, thousands that have gone under. They need to have safety so that they could thrive, so that we have a sales tax revenue base, so that the city has some money coming in to pay for some of our essential services. So the seniors, they were the most vulnerable. They were the first to be targeted by crime. And yet when Sheng Tao sat on the city council for 4 years and passing all these failed policies, she ignored them. And it's not just Sheng Tao, but it's also Nikki Bass in District 2. Chinatown was in her district, and yet she allowed crime, and she ignored these Asian seniors that were being victimized, and she continued to pass failed policy, defunded the police, and totally decimated Oakland, because the crime that happened in her district, her own backyard, spread throughout the city and now affecting neighboring cities. And then now they put money behind her to say that she did good things, and she failed upward and got promoted to be Alameda County Supervisor. And everybody in Oakland and in Alameda County is so fearful that she's going to continue spreading her failed ideologies across the entire county now. So we're still organizing on the ground, and we're still speaking out. We're going to speak our truth, and the public can judge for themselves the results, because we all experience crime on the ground, and it's unacceptable. People need to know that there is safety. They need to be able to report, but people haven't been reporting crime because they haven't hired people to really crunch those numbers. There's a lag in how they report crime, and there's no response when you try to call 911 and report crime. So what are you going to do? You spend 2 hours doing red tape when you know the city doesn't have the capacity to address the crime that has just happened to you? So we're just left on our own. A lot of people, have armed themselves because there is no public safety, no policing. People have gone out there and bought guns, and now they have, licenses to carry. And we have a situation where the criminals are carrying guns, and because there's no enhancement for committing robberies with a gun under Pamela Price, and then the shop owners are carrying guns, and you have a situation where you have two groups of people who are going to shoot and kill each other because there is no policing and basic public safety in place. The dysfunction is just outrageous. So we need to change something. And Sheng Tao, as our leader, she failed us. She's clearly got issues with credibility. She has issues with competency. She fired, like you said, the police chief. Many of us believe wrongfully the community supported LaRon Armstrong. She left us without a police chief for over a year as crime escalated. She lost millions of dollars that the state was just throwing at us
All right.
on that retail theft. And her failures was just continual, not just once or twice, or but it's pervasive. And that's why we have to act, because every month that this problem continues, Oakland, suffers, and it's harder for us to get ourselves out of the ditch.
Tuan Ngo, founder of Asians Unite and one of the leaders in the recall movement for Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao and Alameda County DA Pamela Price, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Doc writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com and says, tell me if I'm wrong, but Oakland sounds like L.A. City and L.A. County. You're not wrong, Doc.
Sometimes it's a little too close. And Randy, if you want to go back and listen to an episode before the fires when there wasn't so much fire talk, that is easy to do.
Like, let's say you want to brush up on all the escapades of one Sheng E. Tao.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Go to KABC.com, click on podcast.
And he said absolutely.
Go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes.
Absolutely.
You do a Google on the YouTube and get that handy-dandy KABC app.
Absolutely.
Search KABC AM in the Apple App Store or the Android Store. It's the easiest way to listen live to this radio station and download all the podcasts.
And we still got our Oakland A's, baby.
No, you don't.
And coming up next week, we're going on the road.
A week from tomorrow, we're going to be in Orange County, so you've got to come see us. Come see Johnny and I broadcast live from noon to 3 on Friday the 7th at Rove Santa Ana. Rove Santa Ana is a full-service EV charging station with 40 ultra-fast EV chargers, a 24/7 lounge with restrooms and free Wi-Fi, a car wash, and a premium convenience store. Recharge by Gelson's. We're going to have free samples from vendors and barbecuing going on, so come hungry as we broadcast live. Rove and Recharge by Gelson's are located at 1008 East 17th Street in Santa Ana, off the 5 at the corner of East 17th and Lincoln. We'll see you live a week from tomorrow, Friday the 7th.
Who was it who said in the Obama administration, never let a good crisis go to waste? Was that Rahm Emanuel?
Sounds like it.
I think so. That is a philosophy that many people have. Whenever there's a crisis, you can get away with more than you otherwise would be able to get away with, so why not? Clearly, that's a sentiment that just isn't held by Rahm Emanuel. There are members of the Los Angeles City Council who, anytime something goes wrong in the world, they say, you know what? We should use that as the excuse for an eviction moratorium. And Randy, that's exactly what's going on right now in Los Angeles.
Yesterday, Hugo Soto Martinez.
Yeah, clap that up.
And Ulysses Hernandez.
Yes!
Got shut down by the other members of the city council as they tried to sneak one past the goalie. In the name of helping people affected by the fire, they wanted to pass an eviction moratorium and a blanket rent freeze throughout the entire city of Los Angeles. And the city council stood up and said no. Partially because the room was full of mom and pop landlords that said, you screwed us over during COVID. You're not going to do it to us again.
Good for them for showing up.
And it wasn't just the members of the public that showed up and made their voice heard, but you started to hear the most outspoken you've ever heard from some members of the city council, like John Lee in the North Valley, who went off on Hugo and Ulysses' plan. This happened at yesterday's LA City Council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, it's disappointing and concerning to see the eviction moratorium being pushed forward today. At a time with so much uncertainty, this body is choosing to take advantage of an event that demands compassion and thoughtful response.
Like helping the people that are actually affected by the fires, not using it as an opportunity to push your political agenda.
And by the way, if you want to just break this thing down, if they owned homes and they now don't have homes and they're looking for properties, if you let the deadbeats who are currently not paying to stay in the apartments and homes that they're in currently, doesn't that tighten up inventory for them?
Instead of offering real targeted support, we're pursuing a blanket policy that is only going to make a complicated housing crisis even worse.
Well, you got to remember who Hugo and Eunice say they need to help here. It's not so much the people that lost their homes in the Palisades they care about. They care about all of the gardeners and the nannies and the maids that don't have work because the houses they worked in burned down. Some city council members are directly trying to help those people by finding them other work. Hugo says, perfect time for a rent freeze.
I see.
Let's be clear. Nobody today is denying that the folks who were impacted by the fires need help. We are all in agreement on that. But to approve a blanket policy that ties the hands of housing providers and once again forces control of their properties out of their hands would be a misstep by this body. When we as a city tell developers and property owners that at any moment the Los Angeles City Council can commandeer your investment, who is going to want to build in this city? Who is going to want to do business here?
This is the loudest I've ever heard him.
By the way, let's just walk through this for a second. Let's say you're trying to do something we'll take a gardener, for example. My gardener has customers not just in one specific neighborhood or on one specific street. They're all over. He may have a handful in my city. He may have a handful in the city over. He may have a handful in the city over from that one. But on Monday, he may take care of one part of town. On Tuesday, he takes care of another part of town. All of your customers aren't in the affected area. So if you are the gardener, my guess is you either pick up extra clients now that you no longer have to go to Pacific Palisades, but it's not like you have zero clients. Am I missing something?
No, you're not missing something, but this is the sob story that Hugo and Eunice were trying to get past the goalie here.
If we truly want to help those directly impacted by the fires and have been displaced, then let's focus on doing that in a way that doesn't harm housing providers and discourage investment in the very housing our city desperately needs.
See, all the landlords didn't boo him.
Well, it's good that the normal people are showing up for once, because typically it's the communists that show up, and you would assume that that's where the political will is in the city.
But you got to remember, it is difficult for the regular people to show up at these meetings. You know how many city councils, especially the smaller cities, they have their meetings at night so the public can show up? When does the city of Los Angeles schedule their meetings? At 10 o'clock in the morning on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Well, there you go.
Every other agency that is offering...
If you got nothing to do at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, chances are you're a gadfly who goes to the LA City Council meetings.
Every other agency that is offering assistance has clear processes in place, whether it's FEMA, the Department of Economic Opportunity, or EWDD. They require proof of eligibility. So why are we insisting on taking a different, less effective approach? Self-attestation is the least effective way to do this.
See, this was the other part of Hugo's plan. All you have to do, if this passed, is say, I'm affected by the wildfires, and you don't have to pay your rent.
Well, everyone's going to claim that. It's like if you show up to the emergency room, if you don't want to wait there for 10 hours, you say you have chest pains.
And what did we see during COVID? We saw a whole lot of people take advantage of those eviction moratoriums. Even when they could pay the rent, they wouldn't pay the rent. There was even one guy who refused to pay the rent to his landlord. I think you remember this story in Northern California, and then he was subletting the property.
Total scam.
Do we really believe that landlords are going to be willing to rent to people who have lost everything, very well knowing that as soon as they rent to a new tenant, they will immediately take a financial loss on their goodwill? This emergency should not be a zero-sum game.
But it was for Hugo Soto Martinez. Would you like to hear some of his defense?
Okay, I'm curious to find out what the argument is for an eviction moratorium in response to the fires.
Hugo, it's your turn.
Much, Council President. I want to make comments on the item. I think we'll have a vote about referring it to committee soon, but I just want to clarify a few things for the public and for my colleagues, because I think a lot of things were said that are just simply not true. Well,
So you're calling John Lee a liar?
Pretty much.
Spoiler alert, later on in the meeting, John Lee calls Hugo a liar.
One thing that was true is the comments that people don't know what they're voting on, and that's reflective on the comments that they made. There's clearly not understanding what's in front of us.
Yeah, they literally tried to slip something together and push it out of committee so they could vote on it without anybody knowing what was going on, but the landlords got wise to it and came to the meeting and screamed at all of them.
And if you don't agree with them, you're dumb.
First of all, this is not a blanket policy.
Yes, it is.
If you say you're impacted by the fires, it applies to you.
That's how the COVID one worked. All you had to say was, I'm impacted by COVID, and people had to believe you.
Anybody that thinks this is a blanket policy is clearly not reading the language right or reading the amendments that were introduced. This is a very narrowly tailored policy that is seeking to help the people who have had economic hardship or have lost their jobs due to the fires. That's it.
So how come you're not just working to directly help those people? Because you're not talking about that many people. This isn't like when the entire city was out of work during COVID.
How many homes burned down in Pacific Palisades?
Thousands.
Okay. So you're talking about a pool of people. If you're talking about the gardeners and you're talking about the dog walkers and people who work in those sorts of jobs, you're talking about literally a handful of people.
You're talking about 6,000 structures that displaced thousands and thousands of people. But for the people that worked in those homes and some of the businesses, and mind you, the grocery stores that burned down, all of those grocery stores, whether it's Gelson's, whether it's Ralph's or Vaughn's, they relocated those employees to other stores. So those people aren't the ones that are out of work. You're talking about a very specific pool of people that you could just directly help.
But again, you're not talking about people largely who are totally unemployed. Maybe they lost a few clients, but that could happen because the clients got laid off or they moved or whatever the case may be. Usually they can make up for it somewhere else.
It's not about anybody else. I hope everyone in this room can agree that
He sounds mad.
Yeah, because he's used to getting what he wants.
I hope everyone in this room can agree that those folks need our support right now in the city of Los Angeles.
Or are you using those folks to pass your agenda, which is you don't want anybody to make money off of property?
And by the way, if you work there, what's to say you even live in the city of Los Angeles? I've never lived in the city of Los Angeles. I've lived in independent municipalities in L.A. County, in Orange County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County. I've never lived in the city of L.A. I've worked in the city of L.A., worked there for a very long time, but I've never actually lived there.
And think about this, too. If Hugo got his way here and they passed a rent freeze, so nobody could raise their rents for a year in Los Angeles, what's about to happen to property owners and homeowners? Their utility rates are going to go up, especially if SoCal Edison is to blame for that fire, and their insurance is about to go up, and they're going to have to eat those costs because now they can't kick anybody out and now they can't raise the rent.
You notice he's not talking about bending over backwards for the fire victims.
Of course not.
You know, you could waive all of the fees for all of the permits or anything that the city requires from you as a homeowner for the people who actually had their structures burned down. There are ways the city could help those people, but that's not what he's looking to do. He's looking to go after landowners. In many cases, you could be someone whose home that you live in burned down in Pacific Palisades, but your job is that you own apartment buildings in other parts of town. He might be targeting you.
Now, so that image is clear. That is who we're trying to address right here. And I have a constituent in my district that I spoke to yesterday that lost her job.
So have you helped her get a new one?
That's typically what happens.
Or if she's short on rent, you can literally just use your discretionary funding to help her out. But you're going to change the entire policy for a city of 4 million people because of that person? They have learned, I'll say a lot of the members of the city council have learned the lessons. But Hugo and Nithya and Ulysses, they have not learned the lessons from the eviction moratoriums of COVID that were devastating.
No, I don't know how landlords have been made whole. I don't know how they stayed afloat during COVID. because they were all treated like piñatas.
Well, a lot of them said screw it, and they sold to the big developers and the big corporate landlords that we all don't want.
She lost her job the day after the fire because a place where she worked burned down. And the only thing no paycheck. The only thing she has is unemployment and...
Oh, so she's getting unemployment.
Okay, so she's being taken care of.
That's not going to be enough to pay the rent. It's going to take her a little bit to get on her feet, which I think a year of this policy is more than adequate. Now, people keep using the word eviction moratorium, eviction moratorium. This is not an eviction moratorium.
Yes, it is.
Wait, so he's going to make it so she doesn't have to pay rent for a year?
Yes.
While she's collecting unemployment?
Yes. That's what we did during COVID.
I see.
This is an eviction defense. There is a difference between the two. I see some faces in the crowd reacting to it.
The city of LA passed so many renter protections when they got rid of the eviction moratorium. Apparently, none of that matters because we need to have the whole moratorium over again over a completely different kind of disaster. And that one didn't work.
Reacting to it. Eviction moratorium would be that nobody can file eviction filing. That can still happen.
And if you say, I'm a victim of the fires, no eviction.